The pattern goes like this. A colony loses its queen mid-season. The beekeeper orders a replacement, introduces her correctly. Queen cage, candy plug, 3 days of isolation, textbook procedure. She's accepted. She begins laying. The brood pattern looks solid. 5 or 6 months later, the colony is superseding her. The beekeeper orders another queen, same outcome. A year later, they're on their third replacement queen in the same hive, and they're wondering what's wrong with their introduction method, or their colony, or their luck. Nothing is wrong with their introduction method. GM Doolittle documented the actual cause in 1889. Not as theory, as observation, accumulated across years of working queen cells in his New York apiaries. And what he identified had nothing to do with introduction, transit stress, or colony temperament. It had to do with what happened inside a wax cell during a window of time that most beekeepers never think about, and that commercial queen production rarely discusses openly. The queen that superseded at month 6 was not a failed introduction. She was a biological prediction, written before she ever left the cell. If that kind of historically grounded biology is useful to you, a like on this video helps other serious beekeepers find it. And if you've ever replaced a queen twice in the same season without finding a clear reason, leave a note below. It's a more common experience than the industry tends to acknowledge. The standard explanation for early queen failure runs through 3 categories. Introduction stress. The queen was improperly released or never fully accepted by the colony. Transit damage. She was chilled during shipping, held too long in a mailing cage, or arrived already compromised. Colony conditions. A hive with a high mite load, a laying worker problem, or insufficient nurse bee population was unlikely to accept any queen regardless of technique. These explanations are not entirely wrong. All 3 of those things do happen, and when they happen, they produce genuine queen failure. The trouble is that they have become the default explanation for every early supersedure event, regardless of whether the specific evidence points to them. A beekeeper who introduced a queen correctly into a healthy colony, good population, mite levels in range, and watched that queen supersede at month 5 or 6 reaches for the same short list of explanations because no other framework is available. The introduction gets second-guessed even though it was done right. The hive gets blamed even though it was doing precisely what it is biologically designed to do when it detects a queen whose productive capacity is declining ahead of schedule. What the colony detects, and the beekeeper cannot see through a veil, is a queen whose biology is already running out of runway. Not because of anything that happened during introduction, not because of anything that happened during shipping, because of what happened during her larval development, weeks before she was ever a queen. Weeks before she was mailed, weeks before the beekeeper was aware she existed. Every queen in the visible world, the well-laying, pheromone-saturated queen working across a colony of 50,000 bees, was once a larva floating in a wax cell, receiving royal jelly from nurse bees that pressed in around her from every direction. And everything about what she became was shaped by that feeding, by how much was delivered, how consistently, and across how many critical hours of development. That is the variable Doolittle was watching. Every queen that emerges from a cell looks finished. The biology doesn't announce what was missed. G.M. Doolittle published Scientific Queen Rearing in 1889, drawing on years of practical work at his operation in Borodino, New York. By that time, he had refined and systematized the artificial grafting method, transferring young larvae from worker cells into prepared queen cups to be developed by nurse bees into laying queens. The technique he developed is still the mechanical foundation of how the majority of queens in the United States are produced today. What is not still standard is the specific discipline Doolittle applied to when that grafting occurred, which colonies performed the developing, and at what density nurse bees attended the cells. The first thing Doolittle documented with rigour was larval age at grafting. He was insistent that the larva transferred into a queen cup be as young as possible, under 24 hours from the moment it hatched from the egg. The reasoning was not procedural, it was biological. A larva that has already spent 2 or 3 days developing in a worker cell has spent 2 or 3 days receiving worker-directed feeding. The switch to royal jelly can still produce a queen from that larva, but the window of maximum developmental plasticity, the period when the biology of what the larva becomes is most completely open to the influence of its nutrition, is narrowing with every hour that passes after hatching. Grafting at under 24 hours captured the full window. Grafting at 2 or 3 days old entered it late. Doolittle wasn't working from theory. He was working from outcomes across seasons. And the variable he kept returning to was not what he grafted. It was when. A larva transferred at under 24 hours, placed into a properly prepared queen cup, and raised in a colony with adequate nurse bee concentration, received the maximum possible royal jelly investment across the full window of developmental influence. What emerged from that cell was a queen with fully developed ovaries, a well-provisioned spermatheca, and the mandibular gland capacity to produce queen substance at a level that could chemically satiate a large colony's demand for an extended period. Not months, years. A larva grafted at 2 or 3 days old received a compressed version of that investment. The resulting queen at emergence could appear identical in every observable way. Her size, her gait across the comb, her acceptance behaviour, her initial laying pattern. The colony accepted her. The beekeeper was satisfied, but the internal biology told a different story. Ovariole count, spermatheca volume, glandular development. These are not things visible through a veil at the end of an introduction cage. A queen's ovaries contain paired tubular structures, the ovarioles, through which she produces every egg she will lay during her productive life. The number of functional ovarioles a queen develops is established during the larval period, not after. A queen whose larval nutrition was full and uncompromised develops the maximum number of functional ovarioles her genetics will allow. A queen whose larval window was entered late, or served by a thin nurse population, develops fewer. Her peak daily laying rate is lower. The ceiling of her productive capacity is lower, and she reaches the end of that capacity sooner than the colony requires. The spermatheca stores the sperm from her mating flights, the entire supply she will ever use to fertilize eggs across her productive life. Its size, and the volume of sperm it can hold, is also determined during the larval period. A queen with a fully developed spermatheca can store enough sperm to lay fertilized eggs for 2 or 3 years of consistent production. A queen with a reduced spermatheca exhausts that supply earlier. She begins laying unfertilized eggs in worker cells, drone brood where worker brood should be. The colony reads this signal with precision. The supersedure impulse activates. From the beekeeper's vantage point, a queen that was laying well 6 months ago is now failing. From the colony's vantage point, a queen whose biology was already running toward its limit has arrived at it. The second variable Doolittle identified was nurse bee density per cell. In a colony naturally raising queen cells under the swarm impulse, or the supersedure impulse, the number of cells being developed simultaneously is small, 3 cells, 8 cells, sometimes fewer. The nurse bee population of a mature colony attending that small number of cells concentrates its attention. Royal jelly is delivered in volume, delivered frequently, pressed in from multiple workers at once around each individual cell. The larva receives the maximum biological investment the colony is capable of providing. This is not a mystical quality of natural rearing, it is arithmetic. More nurses per cell means more royal jelly per larva, means more complete queen development. Here is where the industry made a decision that Doolittle would have recognized immediately, and would have known the consequence of. When queen production became commercial, when it organized itself around producing hundreds and eventually thousands of queens per operation per season, that arithmetic inverted. A production colony running 200 grafted cells does not have more nurse bees than a colony running 20 cells. It has the same nurse population spread across 10 times the cells. Each individual larva receives proportionally less. The industry responded with protocols, moving cells between starter and finisher colonies, managing nurse populations, supplemental feeding. These practices improve the outcome. They improve it substantially, but they do not restore the nurse bee density that Doolittle was working with when he documented what a fully invested queen actually becomes. The constraint is biological, not procedural. The larval window does not expand to accommodate the production schedule. There is a single biological fact that reorganizes everything about how a beekeeper should interpret early supersedure events. Not a fact about introduction technique. Not a fact about colony management. A fact about time. The larval stage of queen development spans 5 to 6 days. Within that stage, the window of maximum developmental influence, the period when nurse bee investment most directly shapes ovariole count, spermatheca volume, and glandular development, concentrates in the first 48 hours. Not the full larval period, the first 2 days. What happens in those 48 hours inside a wax cell in a production facility the beekeeper never visited determines whether the queen they introduce in May is still laying well in the following October, or whether she is being superseded as the full population is being raised. The queen is what she was fed. Nothing more, nothing less. This is not a condemnation of commercial queen production. It is a description of the biological constraint that every queen rearing operation, commercial or otherwise, operates under. Speed and physiological completeness are in tension with each other in queen development, in a way that has no clean industrial solution. The biology does not negotiate. The larval window closes whether the production schedule accommodates it or not. If this kind of biology first reasoning is the kind that changes how you source and manage queens, subscribing keeps this content visible. There is more historical precision ahead. The beekeeper watching that colony supersede a queen at month 6 is not seeing a failure of their own making. They are watching a biological timeline that was set before they ever made the introduction. The colony is reading the queen correctly. It has been reading her correctly the entire time. What does this mean in practical terms for a beekeeper working with purchased queens in a contemporary apiary? The first thing it changes is the diagnostic framework for any early supersedure event. When a colony supersedes a purchased queen in the first season, the default question should not be what went wrong during introduction. The first question should be about the queen herself, her source, the operation that raised her, the production method that operation uses. A queen raised in a small operation running low cell counts per colony, using larvae under 24 hours old, with careful attention to nurse bee density and the health of the breeder colony, is a biologically different product from a queen produced under volume pressure in a large commercial facility. Not always a dramatically different product, but often enough different that source matters more than most beekeepers have been taught to believe. There is a way to read this before it becomes a loss, not after. The second practical implication is pattern recognition across seasons. A beekeeper who has experienced early supersedure repeatedly in multiple colonies using queens from the same commercial source should consider whether the pattern is data rather than coincidence. The biology predicts a compressed productive lifespan. The colony confirms that prediction through supersedure behavior. A beekeeper who understands what Doolittle documented reads that pattern as information about queen quality and about the source, rather than as evidence of their own management failures. The colonies have been diagnosing this correctly all along. The beekeeper is the last to receive the information. The third implication is planning. A beekeeper who understands that commercially produced queens may carry a compressed productive lifespan does not wait for the colony to initiate supersedure at a moment of its own choosing, which is rarely convenient. If a purchased queen's biological ceiling is 18 months rather than 2 or 3 years, she can be evaluated for planned replacement at 12 to 15 months, before the colony reaches its own threshold, before the population disruption of an unplanned supersedure event during a critical period. That planning is only possible if the beekeeper understands the biological variable they are working around. The operations that produce queens under the conditions Doolittle documented, small scale, low cell counts, rigorous attention to larval age, high nurse bee density produced queens that beekeepers of that era described as laying consistently for 2 and 3 years and holding large colonies in productive stability across multiple seasons. That standard is not historical mythology, it is a biological outcome. The same conditions produce the same results today. Small-scale queen rearing operations that follow these principles exist in the United States. They are not always easy to locate, and they are rarely price competitive with large commercial production. But the queen they produce is a different biological product, and a beekeeper who sources from these operations and tracks outcomes across multiple seasons develops a comparative picture of what the difference actually looks like in the hive. The biology Doolittle documented in 1889 has not shifted by a single variable. What shifted was the industry's relationship to the time that biology requires. Doolittle was not opposed to commerce. He was a working beekeeper producing queens for use and for sale. But he was working in conditions where the cell counts per colony were small by necessity, where the nurse bee density attending each cell was high by default, where the larval age at grafting was kept low because he understood what the difference meant. The discipline he put into scientific queen rearing was not an idealized standard. It was a description of what he was already doing and why the results were what they were. The industry that followed him scaled the method. The biology did not scale with it. A colony supersedes a queen for one reason. The queen is no longer sufficient to meet the biological demands of the colony she is serving. The colony does not make that judgment casually. It makes it based on continuous chemical assessment, pheromone levels, laying rate, the combined signal those two variables produce across tens of thousands of workers, reading the same data simultaneously. When that signal drops below the threshold the colony requires, the supersedure impulse activates with the same biological precision as every other process in the hive. The colony is not making a mistake, it is reading what is there. It has been reading accurately from the first day of introduction. There is a quiet weight to that realization for a beekeeper who has replaced the same colony's queen twice in a single season. The introduction was not the failure. The management was not the failure. The queens were the consistent variable across every supersedure event, and the queens were shaped by a process that ended before shipping began. Before the beekeeper placed the first order, we used to know this. The beekeepers who worked alongside Doolittle and after him, the ones who read scientific queen rearing and took the larval age guidance seriously, who understood that nurse bee density was not a detail, but the mechanism, produced queens that held colonies in productive stability for years. That knowledge did not leave the literature because it was wrong. It left because it had no commercial application. There was no product attached to it. There was only time, and the discipline to give the larval window what it required. The colonies are still making the same calculation they have always made. The supersedure behaviour is still the same honest biological signal it has always been. The question worth sitting with is this: how many times has a colony's supersedure decision been the most accurate diagnosis in the apiary, while the beekeeper was still looking for the mistake they made? If this reasoning changes how you source or evaluate queens going forward, leave a thought below, and if you've tracked early supersedure patterns in your own hives across multiple seasons, it may be worth looking at what the consistent variable actually was.